So we're really grateful to have Richard here today. It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce as our guest speaker Richard Eisenberg, the managing editor of Next Avenue and one of our nation's leading journalists on retirement issues. Today he's going to be discussing 8 trends in retirement that we're likely to see in 2021, everything from some taking early retirement or later retirement as results of the pandemic, to older women facing financially uncertain futures, to how the Biden administration and the new Congress could change things up on us. At Next Avenue, the PBS site for people 50 plus, he also edits money and work and purpose channels. So overall, he has a broad hawk-like view of aging and the retirement landscape. He's a prolific writer, and his articles and blog posts help people manage their personal finances, find jobs, switch fields, volunteer, and find purpose in their lives. Writers who work for Richard, and I was one once, know him as an editor who transforms their work to the better in substance and style without calling the slightest attention to himself, and like a good dentist, making the process perfectly painless and the results worth showing off. He's a graduate. He's a graduate of the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University, and has been working in the area of personal finance reporting for decades. Richard worked at Money Magazine for 19 years, starting as a reporter, I believe, and working his way up to executive editor. And he was at Good Housekeeping as the finance page editor, and at, I guess that was Special Projects, and then at Yahoo. He's the author of How to Avoid a Midlife Financial Crisis, as well as the Money Book of Personal Finance, and was awarded a National Press Foundation Fellowship in Retirement Issues in 2013. On a personal note, Richard grew up in West Orange, New Jersey, and has remained loyal to New Jersey. He lives in Westfield with his wonderful wife, Liz Sporkin, who happens to be a friend of mine and a colleague since our early days at USA Today and later at People magazine, where she was the special projects editor. Richard has 2 accomplished sons, now married during COVID, screenwriters, and amazingly accomplished young men. And he also is the part parent to Joey, the rescue dog, part Chihuahua and Beagle. So with that, I'm going to let Richard take it from there. Welcome, Richard. We're just so grateful for you to take the time and be with us today and share your knowledge and thoughts.
Thank you so much, Bruce. It's a delight to be here, to see some familiar faces and people who've written for Next Avenue, and some new friends that I'm looking forward to meeting and hearing from when we finish talking. And I have to say that my father, who was a dentist, is smiling, I'm sure, on what you've said today. So thank you for that. So I am going to talk about 8 retirement trends in 2021. And as Bruce said, some of them are due to COVID-19, some aren't. Some are about people changing their plans and even frustrating their retirement dreams. So I think there is some retirement bereavement going on, and I think that's probably something you may know something about, and I'd love to hear from you after we talk about what you're hearing from your clients and what you're telling them. So let me get to my 8 trends, and then after I talk, I would love to hear your questions and comments. So the first trend I would say is that some people are retiring earlier due to the pandemic. And some of that is that they are giving up on finding work. It's harder to get a job right now with unemployment so high. I most recently saw that ARP says that 45% of job seekers 55 and older are long-term unemployed, which means they've been looking for 6 months or longer. Age discrimination I think was fading maybe a little bit when the economy was stronger and employers needed to find workers, so they would be more likely to either hire or keep older workers than they might have in the past. But now I think age discrimination is back with a vengeance because the economy is not doing well and employers are laying off people. And I think they're often looking to older workers as people that they can either lay off or not hire, and using as an excuse that these older people are more likely to get COVID and then pass it on to people who work there, whether it's remotely or not. The second trend I would say is that some people are planning to retire later due to the pandemic. So this is the opposite of the first trend, but I think they're both happening at the same time. So what I'm saying here is that some people are starting to take money out of their retirement plans to pay their bills. Transamerica says that 1 in 3 workers have taken a loan or withdrawal from their retirement plan, or they expect to due to the pandemic. And that's just because they need the money, and that's where they can find it. I think there are also some people who were counting on bonds and bank accounts to provide more retirement income than they're actually earning these days, with these accounts and funds paying, close to 0%, maybe 1%. And so that's making it harder for people and making them need to keep working if they can keep working. I saw the Simply Wise Retirement Confidence Index recently found that 44% of Americans say that they're worried that they will never be able to retire, and that is an all-time high. Not all my trends are going to be so negative and downbeat, but a lot of them are, sorry. But one that's not is that some people are starting businesses and working in retirement, or they're starting encore careers. I think I recently saw that the number of people forming new businesses is higher now than it's been in years. And that seems counterintuitive. You would think, well, this is a terrible time to start a business. But in fact, there are some opportunities that are coming because of the pandemic. People need certain products and services they may not have needed before, not as much before. And then there are also people who just need to work and they feel that they can't find work. They can't get hired, so they need to start their own business, and they're doing it. And the technology and the pandemic, I think, are making entrepreneurship and gig work more possible to do things from home. There's a company we've written about on Next Avenue a few times called WAVE. It's WAHVE, and it stands for Work at Home Vintage Experts. And these are people who are over 50 who used to work in insurance or bookkeeping or accounting, and they're getting hired to work part-time usually, sometimes full-time, from their homes, doing similar work to what they did before. The fourth trend I would say is that some people are looking for meaning and purpose as they transition to retirement. And I know that's something that you deal a lot in. Besides working at Next Avenue, I do a podcast every week. It's called Friends Talk Money, and I do it with Terry Savage, who you may know as a personal finance writer, syndicated columnist, and author, and Pam Kruger, who started a service called Wealth Ramp that helps people find financial advisors. On Friends Talk Money, we recently interviewed a fellow named Richard Hayduck. That's H-A-I-D-U-C-K. If you're not familiar with him, he just wrote a terrific book called Shifting Gears, and he interviewed 50 baby boomers around the country to find out about their transition to retirement and how it was faring. Now, he did the interviews before the pandemic, but he's gone back to some of them since then. And what he found was that a lot of them said they were exploring their creativity during retirement. They were going back to things they loved doing when they were kids, painting or music. One of them was doing stand-up comedy online, which is something he always wanted to do, and now he's got the time to do it. Some are looking for spirituality. And of course, some of them are changing what they thought they'd be doing in retirement because the pandemic is making them change their plans. So people who were thinking about traveling, had planned to travel before, now we're doing other things. One he mentioned is now researching his genealogy, and he says that he's enjoying that more than he thinks he would have enjoyed the travel. Some of them are doing volunteering, and some of them are doing that virtually. There's another book that came out recently that I think is also very good. You might want to get. It's by Mike Drak, D-R-A-K. The book is called Retirement, Heaven and Hell. And it's basically about how to avoid finding yourself in retirement hell, what to do if you find that you're in that, and how to get out of it. And I wrote a piece just this morning on Next Avenue about something called Chapter X. I'm not sure if you've heard of this before. It's a fairly new online support group for professional men who are transitioning to retirement and in many cases having a tough time of that. And it's to help them sort of figure it all out. And Chapter X is, besides the online group, support group, I would call it, there's also a podcast, and there's also a website and a blog by a fellow named Michael Kay, who is a life planner based in Livingston, New Jersey. So you might want to check that out. My fifth trend is that debt loads are growing for some retirees. There are more older people over 50 with more debt than in the past. And the share of families headed by people 55 and older who have debt is now up from 54% in 1998 to 68% in 2019, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute. I saw another survey from clever.com, a personal finance site. It said that retirees have doubled their debt in 2020. And we're talking about all kinds of debt, mortgages, credit cards, and those are particularly pronounced among people 70 and older. Now, in the past, you might have thought, well, once people were over 70, they would have burned their mortgages. They'd be debt free from the real estate standpoint. It's not true so much anymore. And sadly, 1 in 8 people filing for bankruptcy is now 65 or over. And that is about a 5-fold increase in just 2.5 decades. So that's a big and sad change. And I think a lot of that is due to medical bills. There was a recent survey by Fidelity Investments that found that student loan debt rose last year among baby boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials. So we hear a lot about the millennial student loan debt, but there's a lot of student loan debt from boomers and Gen Xers. Some of it was their own, and some of it is what the loans they've taken out for their kids. Another trend, older women are facing a financially uncertain future. That was the title of a retirement security report the GAO presented to the Senate Committee on Aging last fall. They had 14 focus groups with women across the country and questionnaires. And while there are plenty of men facing financially uncertain futures, it seems like things are even worse for women in general. Half of the women who were surveyed say they expect their financial situation to deteriorate in retirement. A lot of them have debt problems. They haven't saved very much. They need to work. They're concerned about losing their Social Security benefits or their Medicare benefits. Some of them said they had to stop working before they wanted to so they could do caregiving for a family member, which is very common. The GAO report also found that many of the women over 70 who they talked to said that they lacked knowledge about personal finances, investing, and the way Social Security works. And then I saw another survey that from the Women's Retirement Literacy Report from the American College in Pennsylvania, came out in January, and it found that women's retirement planning and income literacy trails men's. And I hope that that's a trend that's going to be changing. 2 more trends I'll mention, and then I'll stop. One is that I think the pandemic is really changing real estate plans for retirement for a lot of people. Now, on the one hand, it's causing some people to sell their homes and relocate due to rising interest by millennials to move out to the suburbs or rural areas and out of the cities where they've been living. And now that many of them can work remotely and maybe want to get away from the higher cost of real estate in cities or some of the stress that the cities have to offer. But by the same token, I think the converse is happening, that there are some people who wanted to move in retirement to move near their kids, for example, and their grandkids, and now they can't do it, or at least they're putting it off for now because of travel restrictions and COVID fears. And I would tell you that I'm in that camp. Bruce said, I've got 2 sons. My wife and I have 2 sons in Los Angeles, and we've talked for a while about moving out there, but we're not doing it right now. And then the last thing I want to talk about is politics a little bit. As Bruce mentioned, I think the new administration and Congress might change some things having to do with retirement for the better. There's bipartisan support in Congress to find ways to improve financial security in retirement, even though it seems like right now they're particularly focused on both COVID and GameStop, but maybe we'll stop talking about GameStop soon and start talking about retirement. The Biden administration actually favors some of these ideas to reform the retirement system in America, Social Security. They want to try to increase retirement plan coverage in America, which is something we didn't see very much from in the Trump administration. There's some talk that we might see a change in the enrollment age for Medicare from 65 down to 60 for people who want to sign up at that age. Biden's proposal is not that everybody at 60 would be required to sign up for Medicare, but if they wanted to, they could. I'm not sure whether that will happen, but he wants it to happen, and we'll see. Biden would also like to increase Social Security benefits for the oldest old, and for widows and for widowers, for the lowest income older Americans, and for people who need to leave the workforce to be family caregivers. And I think we could use some reforms in a lot of those areas. I don't know whether Congress has the appetite to do it right now, but I hope that some of those are going to come to pass. And then the last thing I would say is about Social Security. As we all know, the trust fund is not in good shape, and it needs shoring up. It's supposed to run out of money to pay full benefits around 2034, 2035. And of course, as you know, Congress tends not to want to do anything until it's an immediate crisis. So as much as I would like to think that they will do something to fix this problem, I'm not particularly optimistic they're going to do it anytime soon. But Joe Biden had proposed when he was running, one way to close a lot of that gap would be by raising the payroll taxes on high income workers. Whether he'll be able to get that through Congress or whether they'll make any other changes is an open question. So let me stop there and see if Bruce and Kendall might have some questions. And I'd love to hear if you have any questions or comments on either anything I've said or anything that's on your mind. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that brisk and informative overview, Richard. It was pretty comprehensive in its scope. So, Kendall, do you have a question? So Kendall and I are going to use our prerogative to ask first questions, and then we're going to open it up to everyone else. But Kendall, go ahead. And
well, I'm kind of interested in financial literacy and what happened along the way that people are either didn't learn it or what stopped that learning?
Well, it's never really been taught very much in schools. There are some schools that have taught it, and there are some colleges that teach it, but it's not that common. I wish that more schools would teach it. I wish more colleges would at least offer it as a class. I went to Northwestern, as Bruce said, and after I graduated, when I started working at Money Magazine, I actually met with the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Northwestern, and I said, I really think you should offer classes in personal finance for your students, so when they graduate, they will be able to understand things like taxes and insurance and all. And he said, no, we don't do that here. That's not part of a liberal arts education. And I disagree, and I'm sorry that we're not seeing more of that. And money is a topic a lot of people don't want to think about, don't want to talk about, starts a lot of fights. And so it's easy for people to not educate themselves about it because it's a subject that they often, have worries about. And you would think that they might say, well, I want to learn about it so that I won't have them. But I think many people actually go the opposite direction, which is to say, I'm just going to close my eyes to it and not pay it much attention. I think there's actually many more sources these days that people can tap to learn about personal finances online, through libraries, books, but there are a lot of people who just don't do it, and I hope that's going to change.
thank you. I have a few questions, but let's see if I'll focus on one that I've been thinking about. So more and more companies, particularly I think it's going to happen even faster now after COVID, have moved away from defined benefit pensions, and which guarantee you a certain amount of money in your golden years, to defined contribution plans that are more reflective of the ups and downs of the markets. How is that affecting retirement planning for the future?
Not so great. The first issue is that um, not every company has a retirement plan for their employees. And in fact, most small businesses don't offer them, and some medium-sized and big businesses don't offer them. Also, if you're a part-time worker, there's a good chance that you're not qualified to work for them. They won't let you put money in the 401k that they offer their full-time employees. So that's the first problem, is that a lot of people don't have access to this way to save for retirement. People who do have access to it, by and large, take advantage of it. Maybe not as much as they could or should, but most of them are putting some money away because it's automatic, because it's easy to do. You don't have to think about it once you sign up for it. You don't have to remember to put the money into it. The people who are really suffering from that standpoint are the self-employed and other people who don't work for places that have 401ks, because it falls to them to save for retirement, and in many cases, they don't. Sometimes they don't have the money, but often I think it's because they don't have anybody pushing them to do it. It may be a matter of discipline, but I think mostly it's just they don't have an easy way to do it. And so, there were years ago, you would see so much advertising by banks to get people to open IRAs and put money into them. You don't see that anymore. And as a result, not much money is going into IRAs these days, certainly not compared to 401ks. And then there's the whole question about the 401k investments. Now, we talked about financial literacy before. Kendall and I were talking about that. And, if you don't know a lot about investing or anything about investing, it can be, number one, scary to figure out where to put your money in your 401k, and easy to make mistakes by doing it wrong because nobody is helping you to do it right. More and more companies have been offering target date mutual funds for their 401k employees, and that makes it a little bit easier, because there you put your money into the fund, and it automatically, based on your age, says we're going to put X percent in stocks, X percent in bonds, and as you get older, we'll put more of your money into bonds and less into stocks. So that's kind of a set it and forget it, and I think that's been a helpful trend. But the stock market goes up and it goes down. And I think, people who assume that their retirement savings will only go up, many of them in the past few years have seen that hasn't been the case. Unlike defined benefit pension plans, where you knew that you were guaranteed a certain amount every month, now there's no guarantee and it's up to you. And there's a huge retirement crisis today. And frankly, I'm worried that there's going to be an even worse one when the millennials get closer to retirement age, because so many of them are self-employed and are not putting money away for retirement.
That's a big point. Just to follow up on one part of what you were saying, which is the proposed, Biden has proposed changes to the 401k retirement savings that would replace deductions with tax credits. I don't know whether that's going to come to pass, but if the 401 change would likely result in high earners getting less of a tax break and be of greater benefit to low earners. It's a great ambition to have. What do you think about that? Do you see that as at all in the cards, or?
It's hard to say whether Congress would go along with that. I mean, I think there are some people in Congress who favor it. I would say more progressives than not. I can see the justification for it. There have been some studies I've seen that show that wealthier people put money away in 401ks at a higher rate than people who aren't as wealthy, mostly because they have the money to do it, not because of the tax break. So it may be that they're getting a tax break that I won't say they don't need it, but maybe it's not as essential to them in getting them to save as it would be for people who aren't making as much money, who need an incentive to get them to save or some help to save. So I'll be curious to see whether that happens. I wouldn't look for it immediately, but I think it's possible.
Interesting. Kendall, do you have another question before we open it up?
I think I'd love to hear from others. I am interested in the self-esteem aspect of what happens with as people lose a sense of able to support themselves, that happens particularly in older age. What happens to self-esteem, and depression or potential depression that comes with that. Are there any thoughts about sort of how that gets the psychological dimension gets addressed?
I think that's a really important point that doesn't get as much attention as I think it should. I think there are a lot of people who, when they begin retirement, do find themselves depressed and they've lost the sense of identity. And sometimes it's about status. Before they were a doctor and now they're just a person, or they were a CEO and now they're not. But I think for a lot of people, their identity is wrapped up in the work that they've done during their career. And so they think of themselves that way. And now that that's not part of their life anymore, they're not quite sure who they are. And that can lead to, just rethinking things, which is not bad, but can also lead to depression and anxiety and isolation. And I think the pandemic is contributing to that because, we're all seeing fewer people and able to do less with other people than we could before. So it's something I'm concerned about.
Thank you. Perhaps there are others who would like to have a way of acknowledging raised hands.
I see a bunch of questions in chat. Should I just take a look at them and talk about them? Or Bruce
Okay.
or Kendall, do you want to do that? How do you want to do that?
Let's see. Well, if you want to, I hadn't been looking at it. If you want to grab one there, Richard, while I get my chat up here.
Yeah, you bet. So one question was, can you contribute to an IRA if you're not earning money? So the rules with IRAs is you have to have some earned income, which is to say not from investments, but from work. So if you're doing some sort of work, part-time, full-time, you can put money into an IRA. There was a question from Lisa about, are there caregiving trends and are more companies offering elder care benefits? Well, I wish more companies were offering elder care benefits. It's still very rare. I think the last number I saw was that fewer than 10% of large and medium-sized employers offer any kind of elder care benefits. There's a really great report, a little sad, but still really important report that came out last year from AARP and the Alliance for Caregiving on caregiving trends in America. I wrote about it for Next Avenue. And, it shows that there are a lot of people who are feeling a lot of strain, financial strain, mental strain, health strain, doing the caregiving that they need to be doing for their loved ones, particularly when they have somebody in their family with dementia. That said, many family caregivers say that they really love the fact that they're able to provide this care. So I don't want to make it sound as though it's all negative. It's not, but it can be really difficult.
Great. So I just want to mention, I forgot when you were speaking, Michael Kay, by the way, is an LPN member, a new member of the Philadelphia chapter. So in case anyone knows. And I see that I didn't recognize Joyce was here, Joyce Cohen, who's our past president and continuing valued member of the board. So welcome, Joyce. I didn't see you there. Jan, you had a question. Do you want to ask it yourself about real estate trend for older adults? Just unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Jan.
Richard, I wondered if you see a trend for expansion of people who want to stay at home, live in their homes longer and are doing so and avoiding long-term care. My sense is that connected with COVID that may be that it was expanding and then it may be expanding more dramatically now.
Hi, Jan. Yeah, I do think that's a trend that we're going to see continuing. I think there are fewer people who like the idea of moving into either them or their parents moving into a nursing home or assisted living facility if they can avoid it, because they've seen so much tragedy at those places due to COVID, sometimes due to the facility, but often not. And you can look at the occupancy rates of in these places, and they are way down. And I think people want to live at home. Now, whether they can or not is another question. In many cases, their homes are not set up for that. They are 2 or 3 story homes with a lot of stairs that people may not be able to climb anymore, and they may not be able to live on the first floor. Home care is very expensive, but wonderful if you can afford to have it. We have a huge problem with the financial part of long-term care in America. We have no federal program at all or help for people to pay long-term care costs, and Medicare doesn't do it. And if you are able to qualify for Medicaid, Medicaid will help, but that's only for people who are very, very poor. So that leaves out the vast majority of America in the middle class who don't have any help to pay for their expenses. And that's a big problem today. I think it's going to be a worse problem in the future as we have more baby boomers getting into that stage. And I'd love to see Washington think about this, do something about it. I don't see much appetite for it right now. And I feel like that's another big problem that's just heading our way.
Maybe in this order, Wendy Green, then Wendy Marks, and then Meg, if we could go in that order, if you guys would ask your questions.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Richard, so I was curious what you see in technology trends. We've found that even with the younger people now and the online schooling and seniors trying to register for the COVID vaccine, there seems to be a big digital divide going on there. And I'm wondering what trends you might be seeing in that area.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, we have a piece we're running tomorrow on Next Avenue on just that problem on the vaccine. That right now, essentially in most places, the way to sign up for a vaccine is through the internet. If you're lucky enough to get on to the site that's offering them, and most people even can't do that, even if they have the skills to do it. But what about people who don't have internet access or broadband, which is true for many older people?
40%.
And it's becoming a real problem. And if they're lucky, they have the support of children or friends who are helping them do it, but sometimes they don't. And it's a similar problem for homebound people who can't go out to get a vaccine, even if they're lucky enough to get an appointment. They just physically can't get there. I think the senior living facilities, by and large, did a pretty terrible job with technology until they had to. And so, you hear so many cases of the people who live there not being able to be in touch with their family members. They couldn't see them in person, certainly, but they didn't have any technology to allow them to do it. And it wasn't even necessarily that the residents didn't know how to do it, although that was true sometimes. It was often that the facilities didn't give them any way to do it. So I'm hoping that one thing we're going to learn from the pandemic is the importance of technology in assisted living facilities, nursing homes, independent living, to be sure that there is technology available and technology training for these people. There's a group based in New York City called Senior Planet. You may be familiar with them. They do some wonderful training about learning the internet and technology, and I think they're doing a great job.
Who is next up? Wendy Marks, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, hi, Richard.
Hey, Wendy.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, I know you talked about the downsides in terms of companies using COVID as an excuse not to hire older people. I wanted to see if any companies are focusing on ageism and if there's any companies that are kind of ahead of the pack in terms of that.
It's a great question, and I wish I had a good answer. And I mean an answer where I could name off a whole lot of companies that are doing this and who really have policies against ageism. I don't. I mean, every now and then I'll run across an example of one company doing one thing. For years, you would see stories about how BMW reformatted a plant that they had in Germany to be better for older workers there, and productivity went up, and that's nice to see. But it was so unusual. For a few years, there was a group in New York City that had a program called Age Smart Employers, and they were giving awards every year to New York City-based companies that were doing things well for their older workers and also for older consumers. And I was always, happy to see companies on that list. Steinway was on the list one year. The Bronx Zoo was on the list. What I didn't see were big companies. And yet New York City has a lot of big companies that are headquartered there. But they did not apply for these awards. Maybe they were doing them and they didn't want people to know what they were doing. I don't think so. I think what it was they didn't want to make it seem as though they had some sort of a preference for older workers over younger workers. And that's not what being anti-ageist is about. It's about being fair to older and younger workers. But I think they felt like, well, gee, if we say we're doing something special for people who are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, then people in their 20s and 30s are going to say, oh, well, this isn't a company for me, so they won't do that. And I think that's really sad. And I'm hoping that we're going to see change in that direction. But I haven't seen it much yet.
I was supposed to be next, but I'd like to cede my time to Betsy Worley, who has a question, and she has to leave at 5. And then I would be happy to come back if there's time.
Thanks, Meg. That's so generous. I appreciate that. And hi, Rich.
Hey, Betsy.
Thank you. Very stimulating.
Oh, thanks.
I was curious what trends you're seeing in higher education and lifelong learning. Some of that ties in with jobs and other things. But anyway, just curious if you're seeing change in that space or that's still a little bit in the future.
Yeah, I would call it glacial. There are a few colleges and universities around the country that understand the usefulness and importance of lifelong learning, or as Chip Conley, who you may know is the modern elder of the Modern Elder Academy, he likes to call it longer life learning, which I like. But most colleges and universities, if they do anything at all, it's, adult education classes that are sort of entertaining, and nothing wrong with them. I'm happy that they're offered, but I think they treat it as sort of a pleasant thing to offer older people who have time on their hands, as opposed to being serious about education. And I think, there are a lot of people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s who love to learn and want to learn. I'm a huge fan of the one-day university program. I don't know if any of you have done that. If you can, I really encourage you to do it. They're doing it virtually now, but in the past, you would go to an auditorium and they would have professors from around the country giving their most popular lecture for 1 hour on everything from why was Shakespeare so great to the best movies of all time to Congress and politics. And I just love that program. I would like to see more colleges thinking about lifelong learning and doing more. I'm not seeing much in that yet. I think it's starting, and there are a few schools that really do get it, but not that many yet. There's more interest, it seems, in Europe, and particularly Ireland, which has a program specifically about this, and they're trying to get more colleges and universities in the United States to jump on board, but it's slow going, I'd say. Yeah, I want to mention something. I see Amy has a comment that ARP has a list of the best 50 companies for older workers. So thanks for mentioning that. I forgot to mention that. So yeah, it's worth checking that out. There are companies that pledge that they're going to be good for older workers. I just wonder, how much they actually put that pledge to use. But I would like to think that they do.
Great. Meg, you want to ask your...
Yeah, I will. This is just a little context. I'm a member of a fairly young organization called the Elders Action Network. And I'm just interested in trends you might see in the amount of and the kind of volunteering and political action that elders take, and the age range of that. And then I have a follow-on question if there's a moment.
Sure. I think there are a lot of people in their 60s and 70s and 80s in particular who want to be politically active, and if not politically active, then helpful in some way to make this a better world. And there are organizations like Encore.org, which is fantastic. Betsy Worley used to be with them, and who are doing great things to help people. Places like Volunteer Match and Idealist are places where you can try to find ways to do volunteering from home now that you can't do it in person. I would love to see a federal senior corps program to try to get more volunteers and see more intergenerational volunteering and activism, particularly around climate change. I think it's a great topic to see older and younger people getting together, and it's happening in some cases. Also racial justice, but I'd like to see more of that. And if anybody knows of ways that it's happening or ways it could be happening, I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, I can help you.
Go ahead, Meg. But
No, I won't do it now. Go ahead.
Okay.
But I can help you on that.
Oh, great.
And I was going to say the Life Planning Network, and if someone from the Philadelphia chapter wants to very briefly say what you guys are doing, they just started a program at Temple University, an intergenerational program. Someone who want to carry the ball on that from Philadelphia?
Yeah, I'll take it, Bruce. So we've been teaching at Ollie for the last 4 or 5 years and came up with the idea that it would be great to combine college students and seniors in a class about aging well. And because of COVID, we are only doing 20, there are only 20 college students in the class, but the 11 members from our chapter, and Michael Kay is one of them, and he's going to talk about Gen X, are meeting with these students, sharing our expertise, learning from them. And I think this intergenerational collaboration is very rich, very meaningful. And I personally would love to see it move more towards social activism in a collaborative fashion with the different generations.
I think that would be great. I'm really glad to hear about that. You know, I see that Amy Lampert asks whether there are any positive or encouraging trends you see. And, you know, I realize a lot of what I said was doom and gloom, but not all of it was. I hope you heard some of the things that I thought were positive and encouraging. I think what is positive and encouraging is there are a lot of people who are in retirement now who are finding new chapters of their lives and finding new things that they enjoy doing and finding meaning and purpose. And I think that's a very positive and encouraging trend. I tend to work on money stories and they tend to be not so positive. So I'm sorry about that.
And since Amy, actually, Amy works particularly in educating women. Amy, maybe you'd like to put your face to the screen and ask a follow-up question regarding that, or?
Well, I just have a comment, which is, it is true that there's a lot of hardship, but it is also true that the savings rate among Americans, and I'm sure you know this, is at its highest rate since 1960. The rate of savings in this country before COVID was at 17%. It's now up over 33%. So there's a lot of pent up buying power, which again will help a certain segment of the population more than those that are hard hit. But it is a positive trend that I think is worth mentioning. I also just wanted to mention, for the person who asked about an IRA, while you can't contribute to an IRA if you don't have earned income, if you have a working spouse can contribute on your behalf. So that is a way that you could have an IRA. If you're in advanced years, it's probably not the best place to put money, but it is possible. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you, Amy. Appreciate it. I think David Abend, you had a question. I can't find it in the menu right now, but if
yeah, hi, Richard.
Hi.
You know, I hate to use this expression like silver lining of COVID, but you know, some of the things you talked about with remote working and how that's changed drastically, and not just the technology, but the acceptance of it. And when you talked about ageism, and in some ways, ageism is something that takes place in an office. As you know, when someone's doing their job and they're getting it done, nobody cares about your age. And so, do you see anything that's happened as a result of COVID? Is it actually positive news in the future in terms of allowing people to work longer, because it's done in a different way? It's almost like, okay, I'm going to retire to Florida in 10 years, but I can go to Florida now and do that. Do you see any trends as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, you know, I do think there are people who, because of technology, are able to live pretty much wherever they want, depending on the kind of work that they do. I think we need to keep in mind that not everybody has the ability to work remotely. A lot of people have jobs where that's not possible. But for those who can, it's now easier to do that from anywhere. So you can move to a place where the cost of living is lower, for example, so that you can make the money you do have last longer. This is just not a particularly good time to travel, to make a move from one place to another, but some people are doing it, or they will be able to do it. One of our writers at Next Avenue recently sold her house in Connecticut, just moved to Pennsylvania, and because she was able to sell the house for a good enough price, that helps her and her husband in retirement. So yeah, I do think the remote working, changing real estate markets in some ways are helping some people in retirement and make some of their money last longer. So those are good trends. I'm going to be curious to see what happens after the pandemic, which I hope will be soon. Whether employers are going to demand that workers come back to the office or not. I think that's an open question. And then, if they do, whether people will want to go back to the office. So I think there's a lot we still don't know. Bruce, you're on mute.
Bruce, you're on mute.
Bruce, you're
Thank you. Yeah, I thank you. Appreciate it. So we're at the top of the hour. We have 15 minutes before we're going to close shop. So is there anyone who wants to just ask something or offer something or some observations? Or Richard, do you have questions that you might want to ask this crowd?
Well, I would love to hear from your group about the issues that you're hearing from your clients and what's on their minds, how they're dealing with things, how you're helping them. There may be stories that we should be writing about at Next Avenue that come out of your experience that I'd love to know about that.
Anyone want to take a swing?
Well, the number one topic on my in almost all segments that I'm in touch with is the vaccine. I mean, everybody's like vaccine mania, because our age group is now reaching a phase of being able to be vaccinated. So there's how do we do it? We live in Massachusetts, and it's a disaster. I don't know if there's been a lot written about how behind the curve we are, but I'm curious to know what I would imagine you'll be writing about that at some point, but what are your observations?
It's been awful, almost everywhere, not everywhere, but where we are in New Jersey, same thing, which is there are a lot of people who want the vaccine and they can't get it. And the websites just are not helpful. And people are waiting online, long lines in California and Florida and lots of places. It's just a terrible system that I hope the Biden administration and the state and local governments will figure out really soon, because it's criminal. There's a vaccine, we need it, and it's becoming next to impossible for people to get it. And you just keep hearing stories every day anecdotally of people who sort of luckily find themselves able to get it. They happen to be at the supermarket and they had a couple of extra vaccines, so they got one when they were standing there. Well, that's just no way to run a vaccine system.
Yeah. Anecdotally, just this happened yesterday in my house. A neighbor messaged Leslie and said she knew of a place that she just had heard from someone in Newton about this place that was offering them, and Leslie ran to the computer to hop on and try to get it, and they were all gone in whatever spaces in minutes. And I could only imagine that if we were hearing it here in Sharon, probably people all over Massachusetts were jumping online and trying to get that little limited bit of crazy, chaotic, stupid.
You have to get on. I hear at like 3 a.m. like getting tickets for Barbara Streisand.
Yeah, exactly.
This is Lisa from Hebrew Senior Life. I think that was Mount Ida, UMass.
Yeah, don't tell everybody about it. Yeah.
Well, it's full anyway, but last night, actually, a lot of appointments opened up at Gillette, and at midnight last night at Gillette and Fenway Park. And this morning, there were still appointments available. And Governor Baker said today on Thursdays is when they plan to be releasing new appointments. for those 2 locations. So there's a little inside tip if you didn't hear the governor today.
My parents got appointments there, so.
I got it today. We got it today.
Mazel tov.
Bruce, can I
so
ask a question?
Please, Lisa.
So I actually maybe have 2, and I'll say both, and then you can pick one because I can't decide which question to ask. But I said in the chat, I don't know if you saw the email I get from your group every day is my favorite one to read. There's always so many topics that I'm interested in. I call myself a retirement junkie because I worked for Fidelity for 17 years and then have switched over to senior care. So this is a really interesting conversation for me. But anyway, my question is about caregivers. We've heard so much about how strapped caregivers were before COVID. So, what does that look like after COVID? What do you see significant changes, if any? And then the second question was about dementia and people that have been at home in isolation since this all started. What can we expect with that? Or, what are you hearing on that? So those are 2 things that were on my mind. You can pick one if you want.
Well, they're both great topics, but let's talk about dementia a little bit. And I'd love to hear from others as well. And it's a very personal issue because my mother died of it and my wife's mother has it now. And I think, as hard as it is for all of us to cope with the pandemic right now, you can only imagine what it has to be like for somebody with dementia, not understanding why their daughter or son or loved ones aren't visiting them and can't see them or are wearing masks and can't, have to look at them from a window. It's tragic. I do the money in the work story, so I can't speak too much about health, except to say that, I haven't seen any serious health studies or medications or anything that make me think that we're getting any closer to curing or even treating dementia anytime soon. I'd like to think that that's going to happen. I know there are a lot of people who want it to happen. But I just think it's been a heartbreaking time for people with dementia and people who care about them, because it's just making caregiving even harder than it was before. I'm hoping that, once the pandemic ends, people can see their families again, maybe things will get a little bit better. I did a story recently on Next Avenue that said that there are some virtual reality companies, of all things, that are helping people with dementia and their loved ones because they can, don't ask me how this works, maybe somebody here can explain it better than I could, but the person who's in a assisted living facility can put something on a VR device, and then their loved ones who are somewhere else in the country and they're experiencing the same experience at the same time, and sometimes it's bringing up memories that person had when they were a child of the neighborhood or people that they knew or celebrities or whatever it may be. So you wouldn't have I would never have thought that virtual reality would have any connection to dementia, but apparently it seems to be helpful.
Just before you maybe go to Lisa's first question, I'd just like to interpose that one of our members, Adrian Berg, is now the executive director of the Catalyst Institute, and we, Red String, my company, hosted a conference for 1,000 scientists from around the world in September, and are now forming a community of them. And their mission is to extend health span. When I sat in on 5 days of the conference, there's an awful lot that's actually happening at the scientific level it's not as despairing as one might think. There are all sorts of interesting things going on. One thing that, just to throw out there, that many people may know from this community is that taking metformin for diabetes has also been shown to extend health span and defend against other diseases of aging that have common molecular mitochondrial bases. And in Silicon Valley, rich people are going out and just buying metformin to extend their lifespan. But that's just an example of the kinds of not just pharmaceutical efforts, but other efforts that are going. And I think we're going to see a giant movement over the next 5 years that we can't even imagine right now. So that's based on that. So anyway, Lisa, maybe you'd like to just rephrase your first question succinctly so that Richard can remember it.
Thank you.
Oh, I think my other question was just, and he already touched on it somewhat, was just about caregiving trends. Like, have they seen anything that has changed in terms of support for caregivers since the pandemic?
I can't say that I've seen very much since the pandemic in a major way. There are a few states around the country that have been trying new programs to be helpful for caregiving. Hawaii is one of them. Maine tried to do something, but that was voted down. So there's a little bit here and there. I know that the home care agencies are really trying hard to be as helpful as they can during the pandemic. And of course, they're concerned about their own workers contracting COVID, and some of them are trying to get vaccines for them as well as the people who they care for. But beyond that, I don't know that I'm seeing anything big nationally at this point.
Okay, thank you.
So we have 4 minutes left. Last takers, questions or observations? Jan, you have something? Go ahead.
Yes, I've been fascinated by the fact that young people are tending to move back after college into their family home. I think dramatic increase of 18 to 35-year-olds. And I'm thinking that this is happening also toward the end of life, that there is an increasing, and I think we're going to see this after COVID, an increasing number of percentage of older adults moving back into with their kids, multi-generational housing, in other words. And I'm just want to be sure that when you think about public policy, that accessory housing, for example, or allowing multi-generational housing, which is sometimes zoned out, that we would think about that.
That's a great point. Yeah, accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, as they're sometimes called, can be really helpful for people who want to live, on or near the property of their children, but maybe not in the house, but maybe they have a small home that's in the backyard if there's enough room for that. And we're seeing that popping up in a few places, places like Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, a little bit in Los Angeles. But as you say, there are often zoning issues where residents say, I don't want to see that. I find that to be an eyesore. Well, they may say that until they need it. I'm hoping that they're going to start changing their thinking about that, and we'll start seeing more possibilities there, because housing is very expensive. I'm working on a piece now on the master plan for aging, which is something the governor of California had asked for in his State of the Union a couple of years ago. The report just came out, and I'm working on a piece about, well, what is that really going to mean, and when and how will people see it? And very few states have anything like a master plan for aging, but I'm hoping that we'll start seeing more states doing that, because there are so many issues that need taking a look at.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to bring us to a close unless anyone has a last question.
I'm concerned about essential workers, and is there such a thing as retirement planning for essential workers?
Well, it depends on what kind of work they're doing. A lot of healthcare workers, for example, or teachers, for example, if they're full-time employees, are able to put money aside if they can through 403B plans, which are like 401k plans for the work that they do. Often government workers have the same sort of thing. The problem is, in many cases, their pay is not high enough for them to have the money extra that they can save for retirement. So in some cases they are allowed to, it's just that they don't have the ability to.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. That's a great final answer to a day full of excellent thought and information.
Seemed like an endless resource, Richard.
I know.
Just wanted to applaud you. It's just
Thank you.
wonderful.
there was so much information, Richard. It's like press a button and get the answer from Richard. We're really, really grateful. You're an amazing resource. And it's been, I was thinking about this earlier today. You left the halls of Time Inc. and went to this project, which was totally nascent when you began, and have stood by it and nurtured it beyond anything that I think early on you really believed was possible. And I think it's valued by every one of us here is a reader and watches the stories and gets them. And it's an incredible resource. It's just a shame that more people don't take advantage of it. But, so from us to you, thank you for your shepherding this great journalistic effort.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you all for coming today. I hope to hear from you. If you're ever interested in writing for Next Avenue, let me know that. If you have ideas for stories we should do, let me know that. I'm at reisenberg@nextavenue.org. That's reisenberg@nextavenue.org. We have 2 free newsletters that we come out with every week, which basically has highlights of stories we've done recently and links to them. So you can sign up for those if you want to know what we're working on, what we're doing. And I really look forward to doing this again sometime and learning from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. And thank everyone for joining us.